Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. Shea, that is Joel C. Cortez. Joel, it's playoff edition, Basketball by Association. All those words we said before, throw them out the door. It's time to declare a champion, a Larry O'Brien Award recipient. It's time to figure it out right now on the pod. How are you?
Yeah, we're going to break down the play-in tournament. We're going to look at the potential playoff matchups. So there's a bunch that we know already, and I'm excited, man. Last week we went through and kind of listed the playoff series that we wanted to see, and by and large, I think we got all of them, didn't we? They all kind of lined up exactly with the ones that we wanted. Now, the play-in tournament may shuffle a little bit with, the Nets. We want to see them up against the Heat. We want to see the Wolves and the Grizzlies, but it seems like we're on track for those things to kind of happen.
Yeah, I would have some things to say about that as we go on. But for the most part, listen, just barely out with the Knicks, so I'm just gonna have to deal with it. But this has got to be the year that I'm sending a little love to Minnie Way, to your Joel C. Cortez's own Minnesota Timberwolves, just because I feel like as an adult I've never seen them in the playoffs. Like I know they've been, but I just
it
feel
was
like
5 years ago. But
I know it feels like their droughts are really like titanically deep and awful and awful.
Well, in your adulthood, that is true. The last time prior to the Jimmy Butler experience, which was about 5 years ago, it's been long enough that I don't even remember the exact year, but I feel like it was 2017. And then before that, it was 2004. That was the last known sighting of the Wolves. Granted, prior to that, they had been in it like 7 or 8 years in a row. But most people, especially if you're on the East Coast, especially if you're not a Timberwolves fan, you're not paying attention to first round exits, which is what was typically happening to them even during that span. And that's not exactly yours in my adult life at that point. We're, young men.
The Timberwolves played 5 games in the playoffs in the 2017-2018 season.
Yep.
And then the previous year before that was the 03-04 season.
Mm-hmm. And when they did reach the Western Conference Finals, but
yeah. That was the they played they went to the playoffs in 97, 98, 99, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, and then nothing for a long time. By the way, I don't want to listen, who am I to sort of yell about that, right? But I feel like because Minnesota's not a major market and because they were so bad, they didn't even get brought up. Like during those years, like no one ever talked about them. So it's almost like you forgot there was a franchise there until you saw them on your team's schedule.
Yeah, if you really break down the years that you just listed, they have only had twice in franchise history of a string of playoff appearances. And one of those strings was one season. Prior to that Garnett era, they had never been in the playoffs before. So then they've got the Garnett era and a lot of first round exits and then finally some success. And then it's over because he leaves. It was actually over a season and a half before he left. And then there's the one season with Jimmy Butler. So yeah, it is a titanic level of non-appearances. And I'm excited for them to be back in play-in tournament or no. Speaking of playoff games, real quick, we're not going to spend much time with this today because we got a lot to talk about, but we have a new naming scheme for our episodes. We've gone past 100 episodes, which is really cool, which means we can't do jersey numbers anymore. This is episode 101. So we're going to tie this to playoff games played. And what better, time of the year than right now. 101 playoff games. There are only 2 guys in NBA history who have logged just 101 playoff games. Surprisingly, Dikembe Mutombo was one of them, but I feel like we've named an episode for Deke already, so we're going to leave that one go. We'll just give the finger wag nonetheless, but this one goes to an unheralded guy who the NBA not only literally forgot, but literally blackballed. And if you watched the Michael Jordan documentary, The Last Dance, you would never even know that he was a teammate of Michael Jordan's or that he played some fairly critical roles in the first three-peat. This, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the original three-point snipers of the NBA, one of the original three-point shootout winners. This is the Craig Hodges episode.
It's
a deep cut.
I'm 100% sure we have no episodes in the archive named after that young man. Okay, I'm just listening.
No.
Yeah, hey, listen, God bless him, right? Okay, you got a podcast named after you.
And I did not realize that Craig Hodges had been in the league for like 10 seasons already by the time he was done. I thought he came in with the Bulls, and this, his time predates my NBA interest. He came in the year I was born with the San Diego Clippers. That's how far back it was. Logged 4 partial seasons in Milwaukee, did a couple with Phoenix, and then the 4 seasons in Chicago, where he did win a couple of rings, and then was basically booted out of the league and played in Italy after that. He's a 2-time NBA champ.
All right. So congratulations, Mr. Hodges. You have yourself an episode named after you. Let's see if we can live up to those 101 playoff games played in your career. And let's get straight to it. We got ourselves some playoff basketball that's ready, starting tomorrow. We have on Tuesday, we have the play-in game starting, and I am excited, because we're already starting this thing, and 2, your Timberwolves start tomorrow night. So let's
Frank Vogel is excited because he's going to be able to sit down with Alvin Gentry and just watch the games uninterrupted without any sort of thought in the world besides maybe having a beer.
It's pretty rude of you, by the way. Did you see, by the way, in the post-game press conference, someone said to him yesterday, by the way, after they got that huge win in the season, Adrian Wojnarowski is reporting that you're losing your job. Have you know anything about this? And he says, "Oh,
I don't know shit.
I don't know shit." And then, like the next morning, it's like, "Yeah, okay. Well, he was right. So you're fired."
But honestly, not to get off onto a tangent, but honestly, if you're Frank Vogel or Alvin Gentry, wouldn't you far rather be sitting down to watch the playoffs with a beer and to have that weight off your shoulders than to go back to the messes that are there with either franchise? In fact, the Lakers might be in worse shape than the Kings going into next season. Like, if I was one of those guys, I am A-okay getting off of that sinking ship and moving on elsewhere to better pastures.
Oh, you guys got to pay me? That's the worst. Okay, well, anyway, we won the last game. That's what I'm going to put my record on. Anyway, so matchups are set. Here we go. Tomorrow night, we got Cleveland and Brooklyn. Right, Brooklyn, by the way, is the betting favorite to win the East right now as, again, a team in a play-in tournament, but we're all aware of that team at this point. And then you got the Clippers at your Minnesota Timberwolves, who are hosting. How about that? You're hosting a playoff game.
It's going to be loud in there.
It better be loud in there. I'm going to be staying awake for that. And that's not the easiest thing considering my 18-month-old. So, Joe, let's excuse me, talk about this. Minnesota, let's start with them, just because I think we always start with Brooklyn and someone else. Let's start with Minnesota. Minnesota's got a little bit of a built-in advantage, right? They can still lose and still make it in, right? But they win and they're for sure in, which is pretty solid to see. So talk to me about what you think this Timberwolves, since you watched at least 4 or 5 of their games this year, their chances are to get past this Clippers team, and then we'll move on from there.
The Clippers are tougher, and the fact that Paul George is likely going to play. It's been up in the air, but he did log a couple of games going into the end of the season. Right now, NBC Sports Edge is saying that he may or may not play. But I have a feeling he's going to show up in this one. The Clippers actually did win the season series 3 out of 4 games against the Minnesota Timberwolves. That's a little bit problematic. But when you dig into the numbers here, Minnesota's got the number 1 scoring offense in the league. They finished that way to end the season. The Clippers are way down at 23rd. Clippers, again, mostly without Paul George, will give a little bit of an asterisk there. Had an even plus minus. They were literally at 0 for the entire year, meaning they should have just finished the year having tied every single game by that metric. Somehow they finished 42-40.
No.
Wolves were at 2.6.
They were 0-0-82. It's a great metric. I love when like sort of metrics sort of find yourselves in a little bit of weird room. But I wanted to say this with you. I think Minnesota is a team I don't want to play. And listen, I don't know how deep I think they'll be able to go. Because I guess what do they be scheduled up against right now? They would be, if they get out as that 7th seed, they would be against Memphis. Is that right? So if they end up getting up by 7 seed against Memphis, that's going to be a tough matchup, especially when you watch Ja come back and that team looks silly again immediately. But I think that's a series I would prefer to see if I could. And I think Minnesota's a really fun team that's going to be a bad matchup for somebody. Maybe it's a Minnesota. I mean, maybe it's a Memphis if they get there. Or maybe it's I don't know if they match up that well against Phoenix, but I wouldn't hate it, so to speak. So just like, do you have faith as a fan that this is a team that can get past like a first round if they can get past this play in?
No, I don't have that kind of faith, especially against somebody like Memphis, because in the end, it still is a 7 versus 2 seed. And yeah, we're talking about quite a few games separating them. I mean, it is a 10-game difference between what Memphis was and Minnesota. Minnesota still is a 45-win team that found a really hot streak late in the year as it kind of all came together, but they also were inconsistent down the final 8 games or so, dropping some, including against Washington. They lost a game to the Magic early in that stretch too, that they really had no business losing, especially if you're a playoff, battle-tested team. And they were like that at the beginning of the year when they dropped a couple of those games with the Clippers as well. So I give Minnesota the edge in the play-in tournament, hopefully to take care of business at home right away against LA, with that depth that they have.
Yeah, but, and not have to deal. Yeah.
And there's some built-in chips on the shoulder here. Patrick Beverley gets to play the Clippers, who he's gotten back. He's gotten up for those games quite a bit. Robert Covington is a former Timberwolf, but you look at the depth between the two different teams. Minnesota's not only has more star power with a legit big three of Towns and Anthony Edwards and then D'Angelo Russell on most nights. And the Clippers basically have Paul George as their superstar, but Minnesota's overall depth is far deeper than a Clippers team that's lucky if it can go 7 or 8 deep, depending on how Terrence Mann plays on any given night. So, yeah, I don't want to jinx it, but I think Minnesota red warning lights will be going off if they drop that first game, and then they got to play one more. But I think they get out of this either way. They get into that first round. If I'm Minnesota, I almost want to play Phoenix more than Memphis? I'm on the verge of saying that. But I don't necessarily think, just because the Timberwolves get out of a play-in tournament that they have a chance to be either one of those teams. I think you just try to make it a series. You try to make it go 6, make it go 7, and see what happens from there.
Yeah, so the first rounds basically start this weekend, right? So we can sort of, talk about them a little more in depth, especially on next week's podcast. I want to get through these play-ins because I think they're really interesting. But I do want to just ask this one small follow-up then, just in case by the next time we're talking Minnesota isn't playing. If Minnesota does get past, and I do think they get past the Clippers, I do think they get the 7th seed. Do you think that they can make it a longer series for Memphis at least? Do you think they make them work for it? Because I think they can.
I think they can too. I think it could go 6, 7 games. Minnesota attacks you from so many different ways. And they've got a lot of people that can play one-on-one, but they've done a really nice job of cutting and executing offensively. The problem for them, and some of it has been that Patrick Beverley has been in and out of the lineup all year with various injuries, but the problem for them is getting consistent stops. They'll look really good at times, but they will let people back into games, and they will fail to get key stops when it really matters. That's problematic against a team like the Grizzlies that also can attack you from far different, a lot of different angles, maybe not as explosively unless we're talking about Ja, but, Dylan Brooks can light up the scoreboard. Jaren Jackson Jr. has definitely put up points. Desmond Bane is an absolute sniper. And they've got just a lot of other guys that fill in off of cuts that can hit a jump shot. Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton do a lot of that. They're a dangerous team, but they defend you from a bunch of different angles as well. So Minnesota is not going to just out-athlete and out-youth this Grizzlies team. That's what makes it a compelling matchup. Is the Timberwolves at times will just run people out of the gym because they can't hang with them, and the Wolves will execute that very well. Memphis is built with their own youth, their own athleticism to stop a lot of that, and again, maybe not to light up the scoreboard quite as much, but they're going to depress the board on the other end, and that's why ultimately I give the advantage to the Grizzlies, but it's a really interesting matchup as we talked about last week because I think these are the two young up-and-coming teams
They are.
in the Western Conference that are absolutely loaded already. You look at somebody like Denver or Dallas, even Phoenix, and you go, they're really, really good, but they got to tweak things. They got to add a little more depth. You can see all the depth that the Grizzlies and the Timberwolves need already on the roster. It's just not experienced enough yet. So you give either of these teams another season or two, and they are dangerous as presently constructed.
Well, if you're not making the All NBA team from the Grizzlies, you're definitely making the All Daycare team from the Grizzlies. I mean, those guys are they're children playing out there. Like it's it's a lot of fun to watch. That's why if we talk about them deeper in, I don't know if I like them as much, but
I kind of do. I kind
of
do like them to get to the Western Conference Finals. I mean,
I sort of.
But I mean that's going to be a matchup presumably against Golden State, who we picked to win the championship. That gets dicey.
Or against Phoenix, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're going to have to get through one of those teams, likely to be able to get yourself into the final. Okay, so let's go to the East side. That's going to be playing on Tuesday. It's Brooklyn and Cleveland. And Joe, I don't have a lot for this because you know my feeling on Brooklyn and what I think they were going to be once they get to this kind of mode and playoff mode. And I think they're playing better basketball now. I think they seem more in sync now. I think the veterans have sort of hemmed and hawed a lot of the season on the court once they got right with Kevin Durant coming back. That I think they sort of know what they're going to be. I don't think there's any chance Cleveland wins this game. I mean, I think a matchup then with them against Boston might be a hell of a lot of fun. I don't think Cleveland wins this game. I don't think they have a shot in this game. You tell me what you think.
I think they have a shot. I think the shot is much smaller over the fact that Jared Allen is likely not going to play. Had he been able to come back, they would have been able to trot out basically their entire lineup minus Colin Sexton, who's been out most of the year, and Ricky Rubio is not with them any longer. But that was a group that early in the season really surprised a lot of people, and they've lost momentum here as various guys have gotten hurt. But Evan Mobley should be back in the lineup. Karis LeVert, Isaac Okoro, Darius Garland will all play. Lauri Markkanen has surprisingly stayed healthy like all year. He was a guy who could not stay healthy with the Bulls whatsoever. The Cavaliers have a unique value proposition in that they are one of the biggest teams in the league. But what made a lot of that possible and so deadly was being able to play Jared Allen and Evan Mobley together because both of those guys are switchy. And then Lauri Markkanen moving over to the small forward spot. And they just had so much wingspan and just enough shooting helped with Karis LeVert, being brought in at the trade deadline. Just enough that it really caused a lot of people problems. And I think it could cause Brooklyn problems as well. We saw what happened when the Nets ran into, a Milwaukee Bucks team that was just bigger than them last year. The Bucks barely got away with that, but it did cause some big time problems for the Nets. The flip side of this, though, is that the Nets now have Andre Drummond, who they did not have earlier in the year.
Yep.
So they've got him. They got Nick Claxton, LaMarcus Aldridge, Blake Griffin will be, available for duty. Kevin Durant's going to play some four and is certainly long enough. I don't think that Cleveland's sheer size is as much of an advantage over the Nets front line as it used to be. And without Jared Allen, now you're looking a lot more conventional because you're probably starting Evan Mobley at the 5, which means Markkanen, maybe Kevin Love gets a start during the playoffs here, but Love has come off the bench all season. It's probably Markkanen at the 4, and then, Jetty Osman and Isaac Okoro or Karis LeVert, 2 of those 3 guys playing the wings. It's a nice lineup. It's capable of winning a game, and we've seen the Nets. We've seen them struggle at times with focus. Don't forget that this game is going to be in Cleveland. That does count for something too. So, no, I'm not making it a slam dunk that the Nets can get past this, but they seem to have worked out many of their injury issues. Granted, they're not going to have Joe Harris. Ben Simmons is not back either, but Goran Dragic and Seth Curry are likely to play. Dragic is questionable coming in, but they're basically at full strength. And they've figured out a lot of their rotation issues. We've seen Durant and Kyrie Irving kind of work off the rust, and they look pretty dangerous when they do that. So aside from a true oddball game or where Cleveland kind of shocks us because they're at home, and that can be a really loud crowd at times too, Brooklyn more likely in this case.
I thought this game was in Brooklyn. I thought Brooklyn had the series with them. And the
I could be
head-to-head.
wrong. I'm just looking at the fact that Cleveland was being listed as the 7th seed and is 3 games up on Brooklyn in the overall standings. But yeah, let's
I
go.
thought
I
they were
might be
dead
wrong.
heated. Were they not dead
Am
heated?
I looking at the? Let's do a refresh. I might be off.
Yeah,
On what
I
I'm
think they're
looking at
both
here.
44 and 38.
You are right. No, so that is my fault. I am
Okay.
needed to refresh the standings there, and I'm wrong. And so erase exactly what I said about Cleveland being at home. You're right. This is Brooklyn at home, and so now Cleveland's puncher chance goes a lot less than everything I just said. The reasons why they can stick in a game are still there, but yeah, no, that's my bad for looking at it wrong.
And listen, Brooklyn's not exactly a home court like phenom. Like it's not impossible to win. At Barclays. Like it's a weird place when like you give up half the arena for a DJ or something to try to get some energy in there. Okay, so it seems like we both got the 7th seed moving on and becoming the 7th seed, and so now we're looking for our 8th seed, and let's go to the West where it's the Pelicans and the Spurs. That's in New Orleans. They're super excited about it, right? Why wouldn't it be? The Spurs just no one ever wants to think they're good at anything, but again. They are the 10 seed kind of for a reason, right? Like this is sort of the lesser of the matchups. Losers out, and winner gets to move on to meet the loser of the matchup from the night before. So, Joel, Pelican Spurs, the sexiest of the 4 matchups, clearly.
Right. The Spurs, yes, they've got the Popovich advantage built in. But I'm going to take the Pelicans in this one simply because New Orleans has had a little bit of momentum at the end of the year to climb into this. Too. And San Antonio's just kind of been there and kind of in by default because the Lakers were that bad. San Antonio did nothing to actually get rolling. And New Orleans, let's be honest, like CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, the 3 of those guys, I don't think there's a comparable 3 on the San Antonio Spurs. And it does come down to star power in the playoffs. DeJounte Murray is a really nice player. I still don't know that he's a number 1 on any team. The Spurs kind of moved on from a couple of their guys like Derek White. They're young, so you're going to have Devin Vassell trying to give you big minutes. Keldon Johnson, big playoff minutes here. They feel a year away again, the Spurs do, but I'm not sure a year away from what. They once again.
I was about to say, like, I don't know what.
Yeah,
like, I don't feel like there's a big bright patch that they're trying to get to. Like I just feel like they're treading water till sort of something lands to them. Like I don't know what kind of big name free agent you're going to get, but maybe they hit on a big draft guy or something that just sort of changes the outlook of the franchise. Right now.
The Spurs just don't have a direction. New Orleans has better top shelf power. I think their depth is probably about the same outside of Devontae Graham. Tony Snell's been in some playoff games before, but he's not exactly a guy that makes a huge impact. But Larry Nance Jr. has played some key minutes before in playoff games. So the Pelicans running about 8 deep of guys that they trust. But ultimately, you're going to give the ball to Brandon Ingram. You're going to give the ball to CJ McCollum. You're going to let him go to work and know that Valanciunas is going to manufacture some offense for you at times and keep stuff alive. So New Orleans is just the better team on paper and in practice, even though they were only 2 games separated in the standings.
Well, let's wrap it up then. New Orleans, I'm with you too. I don't think New Orleans is great or good by any stretch of the imagination. I just think they lost a few fewer games than the Lakers, right? Like, and again, momentum for me is a big factor going this stretch of the season when you're talking about, I guess, the bottom end of the totem pole, and then just trying to get further in. So Clippers and Pelicans, that in our scenario, we both agree so far, would be your battle for the 8th seed. You still taking the Pelicans? Or you think they get through the momentum, or the tough charging Clippers going to be your 8th seed?
Both of those teams wound up 6-4 in their last 10 games. It's really hard to bet in a single game on a team that has Paul George. But I just I know, laughs aside, but he has
but
had
he kind of last year he did kind of change that narrative a
yeah,
little bit.
and before all that narrative, that recency narrative, he was really, really solid with the Pacers,
Yeah.
Through playoff series. So that said, I'm going to go with my gut here, and I'm going to take the Pelicans winning 2 in a row. I'll take them over the Clippers as well, just because George just got back. The Clippers have looked really disjointed and inconsistent at times. A lot of their guys are veterans, which is great, but there's not a lot of punch, and some of them have been overachieving, like Reggie Jackson, most of the year. Nick Batum has played well in the starting lineup, but they've been able to hang around and not embarrass themselves more often than not. But I don't like them. I don't
I
like that
don't either.
team
I
without
don't.
Kawhi Leonard. I think if they've got another guy who can manufacture playoff offense for you, the math changes considerably for the Clippers, because they have so many supporting level guys who can be dangerous in a smaller role, but they're being asked to do so much. And the Pelicans, with nothing to lose and a couple of guys who can get hot, and there's been some weird rumors floating around that maybe Zion appears in a play-in game here or something like that. I don't think that's actually happening, but nonetheless, like, New Orleans has got enough talent, and I like the momentum that they've had here at the end of the season more so than the Clippers or the Spurs.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, we're literally talking about who might win a 1-game scenario for the 8th seed, right? Like, so, like, clearly these two teams are even enough ish right now. I'm with you. I can't really trust the Clippers worth a damn at this point. The Pelicans only because that sort of recency bias of how they have played, and they had a little bit of an attitude when they've done it lately. Like, it feels like they're sort of coming in with a little bit of swagger that they could get themselves to the playoffs. I can't really tell you that I like either one of them that much. Maybe like 51-49% sort of with New Orleans. I wouldn't be surprised if either one of those wins. Like, I don't think either one of those teams is very good anyway. So they're going to be a quick out from Phoenix anyway.
The Pelicans did win 3 out of 4 games against the Clippers. The Clippers only won here at the end of the season, the beginning of April. April 3rd, they beat the Pelicans the one time. The Clippers probably are a better coach. Ty Lue sitting on that bench still, and he got a first-year head coach in New Orleans.
I mean, we're really nitpicking trying to find a 1 game for this to get to the 8th seed, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, we don't have to spend much more time on it, but yeah, there's something about the Pelicans right now that just has a little bit of an edge, a little bit of chip on the shoulder to it. Like, they found something. They've been looking for it all year as they waited for Zion, and maybe once they knew that he wasn't coming back, it was just that matter of getting Brandon Ingram back, and they've at least got a little bit of an identity.
No doubt he's been ginormous for that Pelicans team, getting that guy back. All right. So you and I both have the Nets moving forward to the 7th seed and playing the Celtics in the first round as the 2-7 matchup. But we got to figure out that 8th seed. We have Cleveland losing that game and then playing the winner of Atlanta and Charlotte. Joel, I'm just going to be simple here. I can't have the Hawks going out like a bunch of punks because of how good I thought they were. Trae Young put up a ton of numbers this year when it comes to points and assists. In fact, I think I favored something where he had like the most assists in all the NBA this year and was way up there in points. And like, dude's like, I don't know, like 14 years old or something, like it feels like. So, if I just go the top end talent and just what I think from the beginning of the season and holding on to that to the very end, the Hawks is the team I'd like. I'm not so sure that Charlotte's not the better team.
They split the season series. There's a lot of reasons to talk yourself into either one of these two. Atlanta barely edges them out in the point differential. You talk about like points per game. Charlotte was up at 4th the whole year, but Atlanta was at 6th. So this feels like one of those play-in games where a crap ton of points is going to get scored and not a lot of stops. Atlanta's depth is better on paper than Charlotte's, but I think Charlotte's top line talent is better and has proven to be slightly better all year. But here's the one thing. Gordon Hayward's not going to play. To me, that's the big differentiator. The Hornets have been without Gordon Hayward a lot late in the season here, and that's part of the reason why they've struggled, because they don't have a ton of depth. And when he's there, again, even if he's not their best player on the court, which it's rare that he is anymore, but he's good enough that he draws defensive attention, and it just opens things up for other guys because, again, Hayward can hit a jump shot, he can move the ball, he'll get a rebound, he's a big guard who can defend. It just makes everybody's job easier when you have that veteran gap filler. And Atlanta's got Trey, and Charlotte doesn't, and that does count for something in close games like this. So, yeah, I'm going to take Atlanta as well. But the Hawks have been so inconsistent, so frustrating all year. Charlotte is the more likable team. Charlotte feels like they played at their level, maybe even slightly overachieved given their injuries to be in this spot. And Atlanta feels like a massive disappointment being in this spot. So I'll take Atlanta, but not without some reservations.
Yeah, Gordon Hayward's played in 4 games since January 20th.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's, and Charlotte's not great. They're obviously a little bit better with him. And Gordon Hayward he can still put it down for you a little bit. His plus minus is still really good.
He's still an 18 point per game scorer,
Yeah. Yeah. He's a guy that you it's obvious when he's out, it hurts the team a lot. And as much as I want to just a singular ball family member, to be honest with you. I don't know. I'm going to stick with Atlanta just because I think I don't want to give up on the pick. That's all. I think it's just going to be stubbornness. I don't want to give up on the team I thought was
wounded pride.
It really is. They're still in it. Until they're out, I don't want to be punched in the face that way. But again, we're talking about battling for the 8th seed. So it's rough. It's rough for them. So
and you can't look at either of these teams and go, oh, they're going to be overmatched by the spotlight. Charlotte did not play well in the play-in tournament last year, but that counts for a lot, meaning that shouldn't happen again, because if it does, you're maybe looking at a coaching change if you got an absolute repeat of things. And James Borrego's a good coach, but I don't think they're going to come in and seem overwhelmed and like deer in the headlights like they were last year. Atlanta played really well for the most part in the playoffs, until they just ran into the end of their line. But they played well enough that all of us were picking them to be the 2nd, 3rd, maybe 4th seed in the Eastern Conference. And we did that with a straight face. So this might be the most compelling game, I think, of the play-in tournament, like the opening game at least, just because I think these teams are really evenly matched, and there's a lot of star power for both teams and a lot of points to be scored too.
So Cleveland and Atlanta is now your matchup for the 8th seed, according to us. Again, we're right in lockstep with each other.
Mm-hmm.
You were okay with giving Cleveland a shot against Brooklyn before. It feels like you got to be able to give them a shot against Atlanta too. Is that right?
I'm going to give Cleveland not only a shot against Atlanta, but I'm going to have Cleveland beat Atlanta. I think the bigness there is more of a matchup problem
for the
Hawks. It's a bigger issue for them than it is for the Brooklyn Nets, because again, Durant's length can just get up over that. Kyrie Irving, for the Nets, is able to get around length. Trae Young will too. It's the other Hawks who might not be able to get around this. And we did see, like last year when Atlanta ran into Philly, for example, and they put Ben Simmons finally on Trae Young, as much as Ben Simmons got, completely blasted, and rightfully so, for disappearing on offense, he did a really good job of defending Trae Young. And when teams have gone with massive amounts of length on Trae Young, it at least slows him down enough. Cleveland has that. So, yeah, I'm going to take the Cavs. I think that's another good game. It's definitely one that I'm going to tune in to watch. The Hawks are the more talented team on paper. The pedigree is certainly there, but they just haven't got it done all year. And like the Lakers, Atlanta just is who they are at this point. And that is an underachieving, inconsistent team that you absolutely should not be betting any money for or against because you do not know what they're going to do on any night. And I do not like that in a single game setting. I don't like that.
I'm going Hawks just because I have to again, but I think you're actually on the right call with this, the way the season is rolled out. I don't win any money. I didn't bet the Hawks to do anything sort of this year. I just
and remember, no John Collins for the Hawks either.
I don't know. And I've gone back and sort of like watched highlights of them, like on the old YouTubes. I don't know what happened, man. I don't know what happened to this team. I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm just gonna move on. So we have our 1 through 8 seed now set up. Joel C. Cordes and Joel, if I'm not mistaken, I have the playoff schedule here when the actual first rounds start for everybody. I think it's Saturday and Sunday are the first days of the actual tournament. So the 15th, so that's Wednesday. Friday is the last of the play-in tournament. And I think Saturday starts the first round. It does with Utah, Dallas, Memphis, whoever against the West number 7 seed, who we have already said is
We're taking as the Wolves. Yep,
your Minnesota Timberwolves. Philadelphia against Toronto, and Golden State, Denver. So I just want to take it sequentially there. Let's sort of do a little breakdown here because we'll actually have some games in the can once we come back and actually talk about this. Dallas, Utah is an interesting matchup. Could be a potentially fun matchup. But I really kind of sort of could lean either way with it. Joel, talk me into a side, man.
Something's wrong in Utah. Something has gone wrong over the second half of the season. Rumors and reports and tea leaves are that the relationship between Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell has broken down again. There's more to it than that, but something is off. They've been dropping big games. Their execution has gotten sloppy, and not just in late game situations. The offense feels a little bit stale at times. They did bring in reinforcements that should have helped this. Getting Nickeil Alexander-Walker at the trade deadline should have been a coup for them. I really wonder whether Joe Ingles, who was such a glue guy for them both on and off the court, the fact that he got traded to Portland and is no longer in that locker room, if that has had kind of a unintended, just subtle, subliminal type of shift for them. But I do not like Utah at this point. They have no momentum going into the playoffs and a dark cloud hanging over them. And that's the opposite of what has happened in the past couple of years, where they really didn't do all that well in the playoffs the last few seasons, but they had momentum. They had, they had a big time record the last couple of years too. And now they've slipped into the 5th seed. Dallas, on the other hand, got started off rather poorly. You remember Luka Doncic not in great shape. Kristaps Porzingis was still in and out of the lineup. You didn't know what you had there, but they moved Porzingis. They reshuffle the depth chart a little bit. Spencer Dinwiddie comes in and suddenly starts playing like he did, when he was with Brooklyn before he got the big contract, before he had moved on to the Wizards. And all of a sudden, the Mavericks just make sense. They're mobile again. They're attacking people. Yes, they're not going to have Tim Hardaway Jr. for the rest of the year. That is a big-time problem for them. Maxi Kleber missed the last couple games at the end of the season, but is going to be ready to go for the playoffs. So, yeah, I'm going to take Dallas in this one, and I think it's a 5-game series, honestly.
Really?
Dallas needs to win a playoff series. They've run into the Clippers a couple of times the last few years and weren't able to get past them. But, yeah, I think it's finally time. Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think it's time, both in the Luka career arc, but in the Dallas timetable. And I think the Jazz are walking wounded right now and on the verge of probably some type of big blow up that maybe sees Rudy Gobert moved during this offseason. And I like the Jazz. I don't want to say this about them, but I feel it.
I mean, I'll go with you. I'll go with you on the sort of it's time for the Mavericks to sort of get a series win. I see the negative momentum with Utah, and I I mean, I don't know. I had so many. You and I have talked about the boring teams in the NBA, right? And how much like we think like no one wants to talk about them, but they're good and they should be good, and for differing reasons. We'll talk about another one coming up in a minute. Utah has just sort of plummeted, right? As far as like how good they were to how good we thought they could be, and they're sort of self-destructing. Like they're sort of imploding. And I don't know if I don't know if a series against Dallas is anything that's going to cure you. Um, I think that looks like a team that may be ready to be done with the season. Maybe ready to be done with the locker room. And we'll see. I kind of agree with you. I think I don't know if it's going to be Rudy. Maybe it's Rudy Gobert. I don't know. If we're just going to see a very different Utah Jazz team next year.
Dallas is going to host the series.
Yeah.
They finished 3 games ahead of them. I don't think there's any great matchup for Utah. I think Dallas probably is the best possible matchup they could have drawn in the first round out of their choices, honestly, because they didn't finish high enough to face the Clippers, for example. But anybody else, I would almost give a sweeper another 5-game setup type of thing. But I think Dallas finally smells some blood in the water and goes for it.
I think I'll give them 6.
All right.
Because I don't think it's in that team's DNA just to quit. I think they'll be outmatched a little bit and outgunned a little. But I think they'll play tough. I think they'll play hard. I mean, I think game 1 will show me a lot. Being on the road, a very, very hostile environment. And if they just don't show a lot of fight, I know teams can get blown out and come back all the time, but this sort of seems like a shell shook kind of team emotionally, and a game like that, if they did come out and lose by 20 or something, could just be all the tipping point they need to just be done with each other. Joe, we've sort of spent a couple of weeks talking about the possibility of Memphis and your number 7 Minnesota Timberwolves, so we won't spend sort of any more time on that right now. Is there anything we wanted to add to that? Because I think that would be the best matchup of all the first round matchups. Well, maybe second best.
I agree. Yeah, and we previewed it a couple minutes ago. I think it'll be an absolute dogfight. I would take Grizzlies in 7 at that point, but I'm really, I don't want to get my heart broken, but I'm hoping for a really classic type of series that when we look back on, this playoff year and those 2 teams, it's kind of like a watershed type of series and coming out party for both of the teams.
It would be huge for the franchise. I mean, the franchise is going under new ownership for, 2 huge stars on that team that want to see, hey, is this something we want to be a part of for the long term? You're getting the playoffs, and you can get that to 6, 7 games, hell, even win it or something. You sort of buoy the want to sort of stay there and kind of build like Giannis did in Milwaukee.
The NBA needs good rivalries, right? And these 2 teams are on track to create a rivalry with each other. And this could be a series that really does that, again, just because of the trajectories that both franchises are on. And the Grizzlies are a little bit further ahead, but I think the sheer talent, actually, Minnesota's got the more talented roster overall. The Grizzlies are just a little bit further along in their development period. And yeah, I'm excited for it. And I hope it's the beginning of a lot of matchups between those 2 teams and a lot of hype between them, deserved hype.
The next game the series we're going to talk about is Toronto and Philadelphia. And I told you how much I think the Ben Simmons trade helped Philadelphia. And we've sort of seen good Philly and bad Philly since that sort of happened. Some bad James Harden and some good James Harden too. Let's be completely fair to him. Recently, it's been a lot more bad James Harden than we would want to see, comparatively speaking. But Toronto is an interesting team. Toronto is a really long team. They're a really, I think, of all the quote unquote boring teams we sort of mentioned, Toronto is right up there with a team that just is going to agitate the hell out of you to try to play and win. And Toronto's not going to sit down with anybody. And this could be a series where we find out, I think who is it? We already know one of the 76ers isn't vaccinated, so he can't play
Yeah,
in
Matisse
Toronto.
Thybulle cannot go to
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah. So this will be an interesting series just to be able to get in Toronto and how different it could look there. Joel, I'm not pulling the upset trigger here. I like the matchup a little bit for Toronto. I'm not going to lie.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been on the Phillies, got to get over that hump, finally train for a couple of years. So I'm gonna keep riding it while you got Joel Embiid playing like a monster. Joel, tell me what you think. You give me a little bit of a smirk.
I'm giving you the smirk.
Are you pulling Philly out of this thing immediately? I mean, it's a 4-5 matchup.
I'm taking Toronto in 7 in an upset special because I did not like the Harden trade. This is not punishment for that. We, like you said, we saw good James Harden, but we also saw enough bad James Harden. And we also got the whole, well, some players are tired of Doc Rivers. It's like, well, it's James Harden. You just got here 5 minutes ago. You're tired of him? I want Joel Embiid to win an NBA championship. I want the Sixers to be in the NBA Finals. I want Embiid to win an MVP. He deserves all of those things. Toronto, for exactly the reasons that you just mentioned, I think can make things really messy because the roster is so switchy. It's athletic enough. It shoots enough. You got Nick Nurse. He's going to fire all of his guns to try to get, past this Philly team in the first round because he's got nothing else to pull. It's going to be the entire kitchen sink of every weird thing that they can do to try to get Philly. I don't think Toronto has staying power in the playoffs whatsoever, but I do look at that roster and I look at some of the issues that Philly has, and Philly would be far better off with a conventional opponent in the first round. Even if it was a more talented conventional opponent, I would like Philly's chances against, honestly, like Brooklyn, or even if they were somehow facing Milwaukee in the first round or Boston. I would like Philly's chances more. And certainly if they were going to see a team like Chicago, who's been stumbling in, or Cleveland, who's been stumbling in. But the Raptors are 8-2 in their last 10. And they're just weird enough that I think that could cause major problems. And when James Harden has run into playoff series that don't go as planned, he has not typically risen to the occasion, right? It's been the exact opposite. And so when Toronto, who is built to agitate and make things weird and messy and mucked up and off of rhythm, when they're there, I do not like this matchup for the Sixers at all. And yeah, Joel Embiid is phenomenal, but Toronto, as you said, they've got some long bodies, they've got some big bodies to throw at them, and they got enough depth up front that, yeah, okay, you get Pascal Siakam into some foul trouble. You got Precious Achiuwa coming off the bench. You got Chris Boucher coming off the bench. You're going to throw some OG Anunoby and Scotty Barnes on him a little bit. You got Kem Birch in that mix. Daniel Aturu's played some of this. They've got bodies to throw at Joel Embiid and to pick up cheap fouls and to just keep coming at him.
Like the entire roster is like 6'7" and above. Like they're really like, don't look up the Fred VanVleet thing. He's 6'7".
Right. It's kind of like Cleveland though, right? It's
a little
bit,
like
what the Cavs have done. But the Cavs are like big and bruising, and Toronto's been like long and switchy.
Yeah, they're going to. There's going to be one game where James Harden gets embarrassed in this series. There's going to be one, and it may be more, but there's going to be one where you're going to think that James Harden is nowhere near someone who's about to get $60 million in a season coming up soon. Toronto's the kind of team to do that. I'm with you. I think you give them Chicago, definitely. You give them Milwaukee. You give them Brooklyn. You give them Miami.
Boston. I like Boston. Any of those matchups better for Philly.
And you start to think, oh, yeah, Philly's probably going on to the next round. Toronto, quirky, long, unique.
Only finished 3 games behind in the standings, so it's not as if the disparity on season success
and
is
let's not
anything here.
And let's not think this was like the 12 games that Brooklyn had with all 3 of their big 3, right? Like this is not an unbeatable Philadelphia 76ers squad. So I wouldn't be surprised if you were right. I'm just going to say no. because if they don't win it this year or maybe even next year, I don't know when it's going to happen for them. And hell, it may never happen. I don't know for them. Okay, so that is your next to that your penultimate matchup for Saturday. Saturday night is Denver Golden State. ABC was a primetime matchable 8:30 Eastern time action. Denver, who will have, I think, 3 players available for this game that people care about or even have heard of. If I'm not mistaken, Michael Porter, he's definitely out, right? Like I think they've already said that he's like Jamal Murray's already said like he could sort of like make it a run if he really wanted to, but he's not going to. Michael Porter, I think Sham Sharania reported that he's not really going to make sort of a full-throated attempt to come back for this postseason, which means you're not beating Golden State. Golden State, Joel, I'll ask you about it. I don't know what you want to make of the last few games of Klay Thompson shooting the lights out like we've not seen him do this season. Draymond Green coming back and healthy. You get Steph Curry back, you get him healthy too. This is the team we thought would come back and sort of make their name known. The Remember Us tour gets into playoff form. Again, another boring team in Denver, but there's too much power for Golden State. Maybe even if Michael Porter and Jamal Murray there, but you don't got those two guys, I don't think you got a shot. This is a sweep. This is staring right at a sweep.
No, I disagree on that. No, this ain't a sweep.
Want to bet me a Buffalo nickel?
Jokic has been that good. And they have
he's been great.
And they have gotten really underrated help in their depth all year from Bones Highland, who's won the backup point guard job and is playing nearly starters minutes. Yes, he's a rookie and thrown into a playoff series. That's a lot to ask. But the Green brothers, you got Jeff Green and JaMychal Green, both have played so well for them. And nobody sees that because not many people watch the Denver Nuggets. But DeMarcus Cousins has played well off the bench. Aaron Gordon and Will Barton have been up and down, but I've seen a lot to like still out of those two guys. Monte Morris is still very helpful for them. Bryn Forbes is there. The depth is not as bad as you think. No, they don't have that top line talent because they're missing Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., but I don't think the depth is as bad as people think it is. And Golden State, on the other hand, while loaded with depth, and yes, they're missing James Wiseman, which I think that could have been an absolute game changer for them. And
he's been gone forever.
No, he is. But had he been able to come back in time and have everybody be able to kind of slot to where they were supposed to be, and he could have been a minutes eater that then allowed Kevon Looney to either be a spot starter or come off the bench, I think it just reconfigures their entire front line better. It takes a little bit of heat because you've got more athleticism. It takes a little bit of heat off of Klay Thompson, although he's looked good enough. But Andrew Wiggins has been really depleted with Klay Thompson back. So Golden State doesn't have great rhythm right now. They've got great on paper and great pedigree, but their rhythm is not great. I do agree that overall the talent level is just going to be too much for Denver, but I'm taking the Warriors in 7. I think this is a really good. Yeah, I'm not betting this many games against Nick Jokic, and I've seen Denver play enough times this season to believe that they're going to put up a very good fight and they're going to make the Warriors sweat.
7 games from this Denver Nuggets team?
7 games, and then the Warriors move on a bit bloodied after it.
No shot they get to 7 games. Buffalo nickel.
This is coming from the guy who keeps picking Denver year after year.
Yeah, but and I'm excuse me. I like Jamal Murray on the team. I like to say it with Michael Porter Jr. on the team. And you throw in I love that team. I don't love this team. Jokic has been phenomenal this season. And we're talking about a Warriors team that's been backpedaling for a good chunk since the All-Star break. Mm-hmm. And there's still 5 full games up on Denver to end the season. And that could have been 15 games above 500 had they Buffalo nickel me. I bet you a Buffalo nickel
all right.
at the sweep Way more. I won't even give it 5 games. 4 versus 7. You can have 6 or 7. I'll let you have 6
You're giving me
or
6
7
or
games.
7, and you're taking 4 or 5, or just 4? If it's 5,
Just
then
4. I'll
nobody
take it.
gets anything.
No, 5 is no man. It's a push. No one gets a Buffalo nickel.
Right.
All right. You're insane. Okay.
I mean, I've been called worse, but I feel pretty good about this.
And listen, I told you I thought Jokic would win the MVP. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Deserving numbers. Anyway, let's go to Sunday. That is your Eastern Conference starting slate. Boston shows up against our number 7 seed, the Brooklyn Nets. This is a series, Joel.
Mm-hmm. And
Okay,
I'm
sorry,
taking the
that wasn't a question.
Celtics. I'm not
This
going
is a good series, isn't it, Joel?
I'm not going to even bury the lead. I take the Celtics in this. I know Brooklyn's got all of the betting odds behind them, and we've got what we've been waiting for them to get into this, but Boston's ability to consistently defend, and we've talked about this before, I think, in the past, that Brooklyn, it's a good matchup for them if they face Miami. It's an interesting matchup if they face Milwaukee or even the Sixers. It is a tough matchup for Brooklyn if they face Boston because of Boston's ability to throw a bunch of different wings at you. And those wings, a few of them are going to be able to score points on the other end too. So yeah, I just think the Celtics are the one team in the Eastern Conference that is uniquely equipped, maybe not by design, but uniquely equipped to be able to cause Kyrie and Durant enough problems and to shut down a lot of the other nets. The big wild card here, though, for the Celtics, do you get Robert Williams III back for this series at all?
Right.
Or not? Because if not, then I think this is a 6-7 game series, and I still take the Celtics, but I think the Nets have a very good chance within it. If you can get Robert Williams back, he's young enough that recoveries happen quickly. If he's mobile and can at least give you, start a quarter type minutes and block a few shots and just anchor that middle, I will take Boston very confidently in 6.
I will say that I hate this matchup as a Knicks fan. I hope none of these teams have success, and I hope they all implode into Barclays and then the Garden. Secondly, if that's an option, like I will definitely invest in a trebuchet for them.
By the way, the Warriors lost to the Nuggets 3 times this year out of 4 games. Just wanted to let you know that.
Give a rip.
I'm doing a little bit of research here.
This is when it matters, right? I listen.
Fair enough.
I don't care because listen, here's what's going to happen in the Celtics series. The Celtics are getting a little pressure for Robert Williams, who has been out a couple weeks already.
Yep.
I've read that if this series goes 6 or 7, there's a chance he might be available late in the series. And again, the series doesn't start until Sunday. Mm-hmm. So that's another week where we don't even have to worry about trying to push him back in the lineup. And so if you give it another week after that, we're right in the 4 to 6 week wheelhouse of where you may be thinking he might be able to come back like you thought. I will say this, that while the Celtics went on their giant streak of beating everybody by 100, and they were beating good teams and bad teams, but especially good teams they're impressive. The team that was tricky was the Nets. The Nets was a team that they only beat by 6 in their I think that was their most recent matchup. Maybe it was one right before that. And Jason Tatum had to go for 54 in that game. I think it was 54.
But they also beat the Nets. Now, granted, this was without KD, so there's a huge asterisk. But they beat the Nets 3 out of 4 times, including by 23 points, including by like 35 points. And then very early in the season, the Nets did beat Boston. But
I understand. Again, no Kevin Durant with Kevin Durant. So I think this is a 7-game series. I think this has every bit of great hype with it. I love this series. It's just sort of a basketball fan to watch. You've got dynamite, athletic, and offensive prowess on both sides of this ledger. I can't wait to see what Jason Tatum does. This is what sort of been the year where he has really broken out, right? Where he's been the guy that can just score with anybody this season. And he's done it a ton this year.
Let's
I
hope
would
we
like
get this one, right? I mean, the Nets got to carry through on some things for us to get this series, but I agree.
We're presuming at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And listen, it could change by the time we record next week. We're like, okay, so the Cavs, right?
Yep.
Not as fun of a matchup, but presuming that's this matchup, I think the Nets win this one in 7, but I think it's going to take every bit of all 7 games. You know how some 7-game series have one game that's like a 21-point blowout, but like I don't think you get that in the series. I think all 7 games are hotly contested and very, very good. Plus, you get Kyrie coming back to Boston, and he clearly hates Boston, and Boston clearly hates him.
He will receive a warm and courteous welcome.
Yes, he will. The 8 seed will take on Miami. I've already forgot who we gave the 8 seed to. Do we have to Charlotte?
Well, no, you gave it to Atlanta. I gave it to Cleveland. I take Miami
that's
either
right.
way.
I wanted yeah, you're right. Okay.
I take Miami either way.
Let's say okay. Yeah, let's just say okay. And now, is this the series you think there would be a sweep?
While I am picking Cleveland to get out of the play-in tournament, I do think Miami sweeps them. If Atlanta gets out, which I did not pick, but if Atlanta does get out, I think it goes 5, maybe even 6 games just because of the Trey factor. But Miami either way on this.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. Miami's not the boring team. That's the number 1 team in the East.
Yeah, neither of us love Miami, and let's also be real here. They won the Eastern Conference with only 53 wins. This feels like back to those.
We're not
what was it? In like the early 2000s, when the Lakers were killing it in the Western Conference. They had a couple of times where the Eastern Conference team that made the finals was like the Nets, with Jason Kidd and Kmart. We're like, oh yeah, those are really good teams. And the Pacers made it one year. Sixers were in there. But you look back at those teams that were winning the East, and they were winning the East with under 55 wins.
The Nets that year had 52 wins.
Yeah, that's what this feels like right now. It's like, cool, you won the conference, and you might have an exciting playoffs, but what were you doing during the regular season that makes me think you're elite? The answer is nothing.
Yeah, they got swept obviously by the Lakers once they got to that New Jersey team meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so then let's move on because I'm straight with you. I like Miami, whoever comes out of that, but at least Atlanta gives me some credibility back for at least having them back in the playoff. That's how I'll do it. Yeah, that's exactly how I'll look at it. Chicago and Milwaukee. Joel, this has the dangerous makings to me of a sweep in favor of Milwaukee, but I do think Milwaukee's the type of team that can slip up for one game. But I don't think Chicago's ready with this team the way they're playing right now. The way, as you mentioned before and alluded to before, they stumbled into these playoffs. I don't think they're ready for these Bucks.
No, and this was a matchup that I did want to see, just because of the proximity. It is a rivalry type of matchup. These teams have seen each other many, many times throughout their history, not only because they're in the same division, but they've had some fun playoff series against each other in the past too, although it dates pretty far back already at this point. It's nice to see the Bulls back in the playoffs. You wish that they could be at full strength because it really was a fun roster. Remember, they were the 2nd seed in the East for a long time this year. But no Lonzo Ball really depresses things. Yeah, they do have Kobe White still and Alex Caruso in the backcourt along with Zach LaVine. DeMar DeRozan has cooled off considerably. Patrick Williams is back for the Bulls. Nick Vucevic is there. So it's talented enough that I think they can win a game. I don't know that this is necessarily a sweep. I think the Bulls, they rise up and they have one really good game where they probably beat the Bucks by 20 plus at home, in Chicago. I think you get one of those punch in the mouth type of game 3s where maybe Milwaukee wins the first 2, or maybe Chicago can steal game 1 and everybody freaks out a little bit. Steal game 2, tie it up,
we haven't had it. We haven't talked about a series yet, and we always seem to get one of those first game 1s that just says, "Oh wait, are these this team?" And did Milwaukee deal with that last year? I think Milwaukee had it like a series or
They've
two.
They've had issues with that before, and then the Bucks. Classically, what happens is you steal that game 1 and then the Bucks wake up and wind up kicking the pants off somebody. So I'll take this in 5. I think Chicago is capable of 6, But Chicago, even though they're not as wounded as we think, guys have been coming back kind of piecemeal, and they just have not had that rhythm or that mojo, that they did through the first half of the season, maybe even first 2/3 of the season. Whereas Milwaukee has found momentum, and they've got that Giannis guy who's pretty good, and they've got a roster that won the NBA championship last year, and returning a lot of those key guys, or they made noticeable upgrades. I think the fact that Brook Lopez is back and has had a chance to shake off the rust, you move Bobby Portis back to the bench where he's especially helpful. Grayson Allen has been an upgrade over Dante DiVincenzo. Pat Connaughton is back. Milwaukee's got their depth. They've got it figured out. They were on cruise control for part of the year. The foot is down on the gas pedal. Milwaukee's my favorite coming out of the East. And, I said that at the beginning of the season. I said that the last time we picked all this too. So Bulls definitely do not get past them, but I think they steal a game and they do it in pretty decided fashion.
Well, they haven't done anything to tell you that they shouldn't be your favorite going into this. Last year's Milwaukee team, of course, they started with Miami, but that was a revenge series, and they beat the crap out of them in 4 games. Only one of those games they beat the crap, or 3 of those games they beat the crap out of them. But against Brooklyn, they dropped the first 2, including Game 2. They lost by 39. And then the conference finals, they lost the first game to Atlanta at home. And then NBA Finals, remember, they lost the first 2 at Phoenix. So
all 4 of the Bulls games against Milwaukee happened here after January 1st, which is a little weird, especially for division opponents. And the Bucks won. The Bucks won all 4 times.
Maybe a punch in the mouth game. Maybe a hey, come back there kind of thing. But I feel like also when I've watched Milwaukee recently, they seem really focused. Like they seem like whatever was starting the beginning in the middle of the year, like in the last 2 months, especially the last month, they've sort of rallied the troops and like, okay, it's go time. We know how to turn this on. It's the same group of guys essentially. We know how to turn the switch and we know how to get ready for the stretch. So they weren't my pick coming into this, but like watching them the last month, maybe.
Especially with the rest of the East, failing to grab the imagination. You've got teams that for various reasons, mostly injuries, were hot. At one point, Brooklyn, Cleveland, what have you, Charlotte was hot, and now they're not. Miami's just been there. We talked about them. Philly is such a wild card with Harden. What kind of playoff James Harden are we going to get? Boston looks really good and really dangerous, and that might be, right now that's going to be a semifinal matchup. So second round, you're likely looking at Boston and Milwaukee, but that may be the fight for the Eastern Conference Championship right there. But Boston, for as much momentum and as good as they've been, we've also seen them be inconsistent in their DNA with a lot of this group. Basically, the Jason Brown, Jalen Tatum, Robert Williams, Marcus Smart core has had some major problems with consistency. You would think that they've gotten past that now, but until we prove that in the playoffs for a couple of rounds, we don't know.
Can you imagine the difference between a Boston Milwaukee or a Boston Brooklyn rematch versus on the other side would be, we have a Miami, you have Toronto matchup, like just the complete lack of let's just say TV viewers one side or the other. You're like, who is this Hachimura guy, right? Like who's
no, I mean, actually, I wouldn't judge it by TV viewers because Miami's one of the biggest NBA markets, and Toronto's got a whole nation. So I'm not going to judge it by
people to show up on time to the game for the NBA Finals when LeBron's there. Okay, well, the biggest thing in town. Okay,
that's true.
Yeah. I'm not saying they're not a market that watches ball, but like Toronto's also the out of the country market, and who cares? Like
the rest of the United States may not be compelled by this one, but actual TV viewership will probably be pretty healthy.
Can anybody not listening to this get asked name one player on the Toronto Raptors and give a correct answer?
If they watch the NBA at all, yes, I would go a little.
You think so?
A little deep. Yeah, Siakam and Fred VanVleet's been an all-star. Like,
okay,
he's been an all-star. He's going to be on an all-defensive team. Pascal Siakam has been.
He's Team LeBron, or who is he? Team Durant.
No, you can, and Scotty Barnes, number 4 pick. I think
nobody knows who Scotty Barnes is.
A casual NBA fan can name you not only one Raptor but 2. a casual NBA fan who maybe plays a little bit of fantasy basketball or does a little bit of betting and catches more than like half a game a month. But if you're talking about the people who only sign up to come in and only watch during the playoffs because college basketball is so much better and that's what I love to, if those people, yeah, maybe.
I would tell you that the Q rating of someone like a Pascal Siakam is pretty low across this here great country. All right, final matchup is we have, excuse me, the defending Western Conference champions, the Phoenix Suns, who I think finished the season. I don't know. They were on cruise control for the last 7 weeks of the season. They will be taking on the 8th seed of your choice. Joel, who did we decide was winning the 8th seed?
I chose the Pelicans. I chose the Pels over the Clippers, and sweep time. This is your other one that's probably happening, whether it's the Clippers or the Pelicans. I don't think you get the punch in the mouth type of game here, the surprise game. However, historically, when a number one seeded team has had to sit around for a little bit and wait, and especially with the play-in tournament, now it's an even bigger wait, and the Suns have been resting their guys, there is that propensity to have a rough first game. And they're going to be, trying to reintegrate Chris Paul. So there are some variables here that you think about 2 years ago when Milwaukee was the number one seed, Orlando was the 8th seed, and Orlando stole that first game, and everyone's like, what? And it's just because Milwaukee played that badly, and the Bucks came back and swept things. So there's the chance for it, but I've seen enough momentum and resiliency from Phoenix with a lot of different hurdles thrown their way all year that they don't feel like just a team that can only play when they're in rhythm. You know what I mean? Certain number one seeds are like, oh yeah, they're a system team. They're rolling. They're going to keep going. Just don't mess with that momentum. Phoenix feels like they can play through that. And that's why I'll take them in the sweep. Cause I don't think an ugly game throws them off their game.
No, but I also think because they're such a good defensive team, for crying out loud,
right.
Like that's what always can sort of like if you're a team that like it's just busting it up and down the court, like you run into a team that you get 7 games, right, or at least 4 games, you're going to do everything you can to pack that team kind of in and sort of force them to shoot half court kind of offense. Then I could sort of see that kind of struggles, but that's not what Phoenix is, and I think that's what makes Phoenix so dangerous. Like it's like they don't rely on that. Like this isn't why they're so good. This isn't the Mike D'Antoni Phoenix Suns. This is a very, very different group. I will say this: like since Chris Paul has come back and he's been playing a decent amount, right? He's been playing 25, 28, 30 minutes, coming back and sort of reassimilating with the team because of his thumb injury and stuff. So I completely get that. So I don't think the rust will be nearly as much as you might think would be there. But I mean, you and I are both on the same page. Like, no one's competing for 5, 6, 7 games out of the 8th seed in the West this year. Will they get the first half of the first quarter? Maybe. But this isn't like an underseeded Pelicans team. This is a Pelicans team that fought their way tooth and nail to get past the Lakers. Okay, so a little bit different scenario there. So, well, Joel, I think we picked our first round pretty good. Let's hope nothing weird happens in the play-in tournament. Although I feel like now we're going to see Cleveland as a 7th seed, and now we're going to have to reconfigure all of this. And be like, hey, and circle back to what we were saying. But
I mean, you got to take a shot. You got to take a shot at something. That's what we're doing.
We do got to take a shot. Before we get out of here, I had you do some research.
Yeah.
Or I think you did it on your own. Since the Lakers have been summarily kicked out of the playoffs for being bad at basketball, we posed the question last week. Who has actually played more basketball? Or was it missed more games?
Missed more games, but same difference.
It was Anthony Davis and whom? Who did
Antonio McDyess.
Antonio McDyess, that's right.
The middle of his career just scooped out and is a guy that just has that unfortunate reputation of being injury prone, and people forget that he was very durable at the beginning of his career, and the tail end of his career was not as injury prone as you think. But yeah, doing some research here. Antonio McDyess missed 297 games in 16 seasons.
All right, I may have overstepped this one.
Anthony Davis. And well, here's you did and you didn't.
Okay.
Anthony Davis has missed 216 games in 10 seasons. So while Dice did miss more total games, and that's what you were saying was, oh, well, I think Anthony Davis has actually missed more games than Dice. No, he has not. But when you average things out, remember that McDyess has played 6 more seasons over his career. McDyess averaged missing 18 and a half games per year. Anthony Davis has missed 21.6 games per year across these 10 seasons. So you're a half genius. Semantics, you didn't quite get it right, but the overall idea on things, yeah, Anthony Davis has been the more injury-prone player so far in his career than Antonio McDyess, and that says a lot. That's who you're building around if you're the Lakers. That's your one young-ish guy who you are expecting to do everything and save you from this mess that you've created.
Did you see there's a graphic going around of like the Bulls when like they were winning at the very end and next to these Lakers? It has like the age number above each one of them, and you're like, oh yeah. I mean, it's a different kind of old. Like they're both sort of kind of old, but like
the Bulls were older.
Maybe LeBron this age isn't quite Michael that age. You know what I mean? And maybe, by the way, some of these other parts like Russell Westbrook. Did you see the fact? Did you see the story that like I think Ramona Shelburne reported that Russell Westbrook they wanted inside the Lakers wanted him to get his eyes checked. Like he seriously wanted him to get his eyes checked.
Hey,
like,
I mean,
okay, dude. Apparently,
maybe it's a Ricky Vaughn situation, and he just needs some big, thick glasses. And we remember what Ricky Vaughn did with the Cleveland Indians back in the day. And
we do. After he was
not just a bit outside anymore. So
there was a stat that someone retweeted. And I gotta go back and find it. I think Russell Westbrook made 65% of his dunks this season.
Mm-hmm.
That's an insanely low number.
It's not good. It's not good. I will say this. Yes, the Bulls were older, but those rosters, and this goes with a ton of credit to the deceased and always much maligned Jerry Krause.
Much maligned.
Those rosters made a ton of sense, and they fit very, very well around what Jordan and Pippen did. They were fantastic. LeBron's roster, while younger, makes no sense around LeBron.
What LeBron told Rob Pelinka to do is dumb. It's just dumb. From the team that could have been built upon from last season to just gut it and bring in like 200-year-old guys. No. No complimentary basketball being played. Nothing. No.
But I'm sure it was Frank Vogel's fault.
Well, you're right. It is. That's the guy who got fired, right? That's the guy that's got the problem. Joel, that's going to do it for us. A nice little. This is a bit of an omnibus issue, like a nice thick episode we got going here. Joel, Hodges. This is the
Craig Hodges episode.
Craig Hodges.
We talked about taking a shot, and that was going to be my segue, my perfect segue into the shooter, Craig Hodges.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. You can find us on Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts for the audio version. If you want the video version, find us on YouTube. Like, share, subscribe. And, of course, next week when we come back, we will have that full slate of first-round games to really dig into with a couple under our belt. I'm looking forward to Arky Shea, and we'll find out in a couple weeks which of us owes the other guy a nickel.
A Buffalo nickel. That's right.